Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Chatting the Pictures. I'm Cara Finnegan. I'm a writer, teacher, and historian of photography, and I like to look at contemporary pictures too.
I'm, I'm Michael Shaw. I'm the publisher of Reading the Pictures. You threw me there, Kara.
Was that a little too perky? I'm trying to be
Well,
perky. How's it going?
it's early out here in California. It's not snowpocalypse, but
Yeah, really, really.
anyway, yeah. I think we're going to have I guess, a difference of opinion also on these photographs. I know you're excited about them. And I don't know. I have strong love-hate for the images that we're talking about today. To me, and I think it gives me at least an opportunity, a platform to talk about news photography and news today as spectacle or infotainment, and how we're living in this theater of the absurd. So anyway, we can get into that more.
Yeah. So absurdity is our theme today, and I launched us off by being absurd in my introduction, so that's good.
Okay, it's all fitting together. So, yes, we just jump to the first shot.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive on in and let's chat some pictures. So, Michael, you have a caption for us?
Yes, the caption on this is White House Communications Director Hope Hicks leaves the Capitol after attending the House Intelligence Committee closed-door meeting in Washington, February 27th. It's a Reuters photo, and it's taken by Leah, Millis. And I just really quickly, too, want to say I'm really proud of the fact we've been showing many women photographers because there's not that many in terms of the overall ratio of women covering DC. So,
Yeah.
You want to launch on this?
Yeah, I will. This is an image that is not about Hope Hicks. It is about the media, in my interpretation. And we had an image a few weeks ago in one of our previous episodes that featured her, and that image sort of suggested she was under increasing scrutiny. And I think we've seen this week that was definitely the case. But this to me is really an image about media, and the first thing I'm drawn to is both the gender dynamic. Every person around her is male, and particularly I'm drawn to the man in the foreground on the right, who's kind of looking back at the photographer and therefore at us. And then I'm also drawn to the guy with the TV camera with the glaring light, who's a little bit behind Hicks on the steps. And so this is a photograph to me that, as much as it's about Hope Hicks and her white lies and the things that she was telling the committee, and perhaps her ultimate decision to resign, it's really more about how media are covering the spectacle of Trump, and then also how they're covering this particular woman.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting how, and novel to me, that it's a night photo for a congressional hearing. And also, and maybe on my theme of infotainment also, it's also seems interesting. It's interesting to me that this photograph, we're talking about it on the Academy Awards weekend. It looks to me as much like a movie premiere shot as it does, like your red carpet, as it does something hyper serious, which is a top White House staffer facing the music.
Yeah, that's, I think, a really good point. And you get the sense of the spectacle, and I'm going to visually extrapolate a lot, so please, viewers, laugh at me or forgive me, whatever you prefer. But if you want to go extend the Oscar metaphor, the looming Capitol in the background could look like an Oscar statue, right? In the sense of, in other words, there's an institution back there, an institution that is powerful and looming, and also perhaps consequential for her and for the Trump administration overall. Yeah, and and I think the other thing that this taps into is a kind of broader media narrative about Hicks as a former model. She was actually a child and teen model who then went into PR and, by most accounts, had a meteoric career rise. Certainly as a young adult, but there have been some questions about, is it fair to highlight and emphasize her looks, her youth, her modeling background, when other people who were her age or younger in the White House, who were men, were considered, young special geniuses. So that doesn't get her off the hook for the white lies necessarily, right? But I think it does also kind of frame that. So,
Yep.
To me, Millis's photo is really, it's a photo that's asking us to do a lot of things at once. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really compelling.
Yeah, I was going to say that not only do I agree with what you just said, but I think that it's the media and politics and us, the public, all complicit in this being too compelled by the bright shiny object and beauty and scandal. And I was watching CNN at that evening, and it was so interesting that they spent the first half hour of Anderson Cooper talking about Hope Hicks, Hope Hicks, Hope Hicks. And that was the same day that they had the White House gun roundtable, which was completely significant and bizarre. And then also all the revelations that broke that day about Jared Kushner. So, we're all a part of this.
And the other thing too, I think that relates to that, and is just the sense of the shadowy. You sort of, because the photo's made in the dark and it's shadowy, you do get the sense of what are we missing if we're paying attention to this? If we're shining our bright lights in the dark on this spectacle, what other kinds of things are we missing?
Yeah.
Right?
In the dark.
So shall we move? Speaking of other things, shall we move on and see what we have next for us?
Yeah.
So this was a thing, huh?
This was a big thing. This was the thing this week. If you're talking about eyeballs and media packages, the caption reads, "People with their AR-15 style rifles attend a blessing ceremony at the Sanctuary Church in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania." The photographer is Eduardo Munoz from Reuters. And just to take a little bit different angle on the same topic with this photograph, when we look at photographs, news photographs, we typically want to feel, and I think the media wants us to feel also, that we're flies on the wall. That we're really that the photographer's there in the corner in a very innocuous kind of way, just as a pure observer. Well, this Unification Church ceremony in this very small town in Pennsylvania was the lead package for AP, Reuters, and Getty this week. So this is, you can't say staged, but this really was, and I think you can fairly say this was a media performance as much as it was, an event to of a pretty extreme religion. Some would even and most people would put that in quotes, Unification Church, which is now split into 3 different branches, by the way, all different, run by different family members of Sun Myung Moon. But we
learned a lot about that this week, right?
Yeah, we're back.
They're back, and there's 3 of them instead of 1. I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're fully in the range of spectacle and performance here. So go for it.
So do you see this as an image, Michael? Do you see this as an image of media collusion? In other words, is this an event that would not have happened in the way it happened if all of these photographers had not been there? Do you think?
I think that's sort of a moot point in a way. I mean, maybe, but the fact is that it did, and it was. And this picture and the 20 other ones that are all extremely compelling made I'm not privy to their balance sheets, but I think that this event made a lot of money for the photo agencies this week, and off of our misery, off of the gun crisis.
And I think part of that traction, as I was looking at the other photos in the sequence and all the coverage that I was seeing across my various platforms and news consumption habits internationally, I think what's interesting about a photo like this is that it both tells a story about the American obsession with guns, which a lot of other places in the world simply do not understand and do not share. And it also, it's interesting because on the one hand, it says this is the American obsession with guns. On the other hand, it kind of creates a dissociation in the sense that look at all these are really crazy people who are obsessed with guns. So to a certain extent, it both gives us a window into a kind of metaphor, right? Like, this is America. What did Obama say about clinging to guns and religion? Wasn't he right? But at the same time, I think it also encourages us to not think about, I don't know, to use the trite phrase, the banality of evil, right? A photograph of the NRA board of directors meeting, for example, would that be, that would certainly look different, but maybe be more consequential in terms of really displaying Americans' obsession with guns.
That's interesting. I saw someone was mentioning yesterday how we got to see like these almost full hour televised roundtables, both for the Dreamers before on immigration a couple of weeks ago with Trump and the legislators, and then this one this week with on guns. And this is where Trump is, trying to make sense in general, but also playing way to the left and the decision maker. But do we get to see the meeting or the next day where he sits with the IRA for an hour? No. So we get this. There is this kind of sensationalization and this dramatization. So we're left with the spectacle and the way that people just consume this week so avidly. It's really toxic.
I do want to talk about something I see in the photo itself that I'm not necessarily sure has played out in conversations about it, about this event that I can see. And I think it reflects this broader sense of incoherence, right? So the hands of the woman in the foreground are raised, presumably in praise or blessing. And then she's standing next to the gentleman who is holding the AR-15, I believe. So I see that woman and I see hands up, don't shoot. In other words, I see a gesture. I see a gesture that is a related but very different kind of gesture to the one that's happening at this event. But so it in some ways, the photo in that reading kind of performs the incoherence that you're talking about in terms of the conversation and the debate. So I'm now kind of arguing against myself because a few minutes ago I said, oh, this photograph, kind of turns us away from the gun debate or maybe the banality of where the decisions are really getting made. It says, oh, look at these fringy people. But on the other hand, this specific image by Munoz in some ways performs a clash. And it does so in a really, I think, kind of specific and compelling way.
How about that's a really interesting take and variation on the theme. What about the crowns and how they would speak to the growing authoritarianism in the country and in the government?
Yeah, and my sense from looking at some of the captions, and I think you can see it particularly in the woman on the right who's got one hand up. She's behind the woman in the foreground. My understanding is that some of those crowns are actually made of bullet casings, and hers looks like it might be. So then there's that too, right? So then it's, we love our guns, we crown ourselves in the glory of our guns, we pray with and for guns. But also there's this tension again in the foreground of the photo about what guns do to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
And
in a
again,
way,
I
it
think
is.
just the bodily gestures to me, there's other visual analogs which are worth thinking about. But I think you're right. It's wrapped up in this broader media spectacle. And I think it's really easy to dismiss this as let's photograph this fringy group to show how crazy Americans are. Munoz's piece was much more about how Moon's the piece he wrote along with writers in the photos was also about connections that the church, the Unification Church, and its various offshoots from whatever family origins, what relationships the Unification Church has had with groups that sell arms. So there's a more serious economic story, I think, playing out here in terms of political influence and money and guns.
There is other things too, like there's the black and white, and then the picture that I think circulated most widely was the woman on the very far right was actually holding a automatic weapon. But I guess it's sort of interesting too that we chose the picture of the man. It's kind of like the boys and their toys. So yeah,
and there were a few images of women. There were a few images of women, but there were also images of men standing in the front of the room, all holding guns, as well. Yeah, so there's definitely something gendered, and also even within the boundaries of this photo, there's a racial component playing out too, right? And even
in terms of the ethnicity.
Yeah, and even and also in the context of absence, right? So my referencing of the hands up, don't shoot gesture, right? That's been primarily about issues of race and policing. Shall we move on to our final photo?
Yeah, this is in some way I think it's the topper, at least in terms of my fixation on spectacle and how Hollywood has appropriated the news in all of its otherwise seriousness. I think on Twitter I called this Dr. Evil meets the Great Oz, and those are certainly big Hollywood references, resonating again with Sunday. But the caption is journalists watch as Russian President Vladimir Putin gives his annual State of the Nation address in Munoz in Moscow, Russia, Thursday, March 1st. Putin set a slew of ambitious economic goals, vowing to boost living standards, improve healthcare and education, and build modern infrastructure in a State of the Nation address. And the photo is by Alexander, and I think he's probably watching, so I apologize if I butcher your last name, but it's Zemlianichenko. So, and I think he goes by Alexander. I'm not sure what it is on Twitter, but it's definitely stresses the Alexander. But it's an amazing photograph, and if not for the Reuters, if not for the Unification Church package, this picture also was everywhere.
Yeah, it was on my breakfast table on the front page of the New York Times yesterday morning. And
that's right. Right.
That was a pretty interesting photo to come downstairs to and ponder over my morning tea. This is a great photograph, and Michael, what's so interesting is your references, your immediate references were to Oz, the Wizard of Oz, and Dr. Evil. My first visual analog was Apple's 1984 Super Bowl ad, where they were introducing the Macintosh computer. And if we could maybe, when we post this after we're live, maybe we could post a comment and a link to it.
Sure.
This was the famous ad where there's all of, it's this kind of authoritarian regime, and there's a giant talking head, similar to what we see here in the composition with Putin, addressing this large group of basically bald, dull, gray men who look to be imprisoned in the crowd, and then they are saved by a young woman athlete who runs in with a giant kind of hammer and throws it at the screen and it blows up, and then we get a Macintosh computer, and that's really great. And so we won't be living in 1984. So if you actually go and look at that ad, as I did last night in preparation for today, you can literally do a screen grab of a moment in the ad where the shot looks a lot like this. You have it shot from below, you kind of see the legs of the audience members, and then you see the scary talking head on the screen. What's so great about Alexander's photo here then is, to me, that it just activates, a great photo activates all of these different visual analogs to us, because I also thought about The Wizard of Oz, and the Dr. Evil, I think, makes sense in the context of what we're talking about too. And yeah, so this whole sense of that one of the ways we're trying to make visual sense of Putin is to try to reference and situate him in these spaces that are familiar to us. And what does the visual authoritarian regime look like? And Putin himself, I think, as people who cover him much more regularly would know far better than I would. But even as a casual media viewer, I know that Putin himself thinks a whole lot about how these things are structured. So it I don't think is coincidental at all that he's a giant head on a screen here.
Yeah. I love the gold chairs, by the way, just in terms of like symbolism, like the kind of codes for the Gilded Age and the oligarchs, sort of autocrats gone wild. But yeah, the other thing too is that there's no vanishing point. The vanishing point is dead. It's sort of like, or it's he is at the end of the, at the end of the path. But the other piece of context was that this was Putin really trying to gin up a lot of fear and really make America the great evil for upping the nuclear ante, and him like boasting about all of these next generation weapons that he has that most people don't think exist, and he was saying that he'd show if he could, but he can't. So this is like, making him an outsized figure when there's really like no drama, in his faux election. So it's, it's talking about like really ginning up the personality and the autocrat, because because they've blotted out all the issues.
Yeah, and I think this photograph captures that so well, in the sense of, sometimes when you see a composition like this, you see the actual person speaking, and then you see the larger projection of them on the screen simultaneously. But here, all we get is the projection. So to a certain extent, right, it fits that media spectacle narrative, and this outsized way, as you put it, that he is attempting to, kind of literally make people look at this and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? I mean, there's the Wizard of Oz part, and there's literally a screen, and then we don't see anything behind it, and we don't have any visual context. So I think Alexander's photograph does a really great job of activating all of these different things that are both reflective of the way that Putin is trying to interact, but that are also deconstructing it at the same time. And I think
do you think there's things we can say about it? I know I was looking at the three as a group, and I was wondering if you wanted to say something about that also, in terms of, again, how this, in my mind, these photographs are really mocking on one, and a way, kind of reflecting back this like kind of farcical, kind of nature, and reality we're living in right now.
I think I agree, and I think what I like about these photos, as opposed to sometimes other photos you see that are a little more trite, is that if you just have a photo of the president speaking, and then there's a microphone in the way, and then you go, oh, it's all for the cameras, and I get the kind of criticism of the media here that's playing out. Here, each of these photographs is doing that in I think a much more visually compelling and interesting way. They're essentially saying they're using their vantage point as a member of the media to invite us to think more critically about the media and the spectacle itself. And I think that's a really complicated dance. And when photographers do it well, as I think all of these photographers today have done, it really works. And I think the photograph of Hope Hicks, to me, of these three, really animates that most explicitly within the boundaries of the frame, the sense of you have the subject of the story, as it were, and then you have this broader context of this visual narrative that we're all being placed in by the media. So yeah, I definitely see this.
And complicit.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
yep.
Very much so.
We're eating it up.
Totally. Well, shall we wrap it up and say thanks to everybody for joining us again? And remember, if you're catching us on Facebook Live now or later, give us some comments. See any other visual analogies we missed, toss them in there too. We're always happy to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and in our Facebook thread, we want to know what you think, and we also will respond. And then after on Sunday, then we'll have this in a post on reading the pictures. So follow us there on our website, on Twitter, and on Instagram. If you are on Twitter and you're not following us with the way that we're really narrating the visual news multiple times a day, you're missing something. We'll be back hopefully next Saturday, and you can again see the replay of this broadcast on our website. Every week's different, but every week seems to be wild. So we're here, and we'll hope you join us again. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks.